report of the James City County Chesapeake Bay Board. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. Can I have the roll call, please?
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Mr. May?
Here.
Mr. Lukens?
Here.
Mr. Dunn?
Here. Has everyone had an opportunity to review the minutes from the 14th September meeting? Are there any changes or amendments? All right, motion to approve the minutes from the September 14th, 2022 meeting as presented.
So moved.
Okay, so for the public hearings tonight, the outline for tonight will be staff presentations followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. After everyone wishing to speak have done so, the public hearing will be closed and discussion amongst the board members will start. The first public hearing, CBPA TAC 22 TAC 0111 36 Gray Gables Drive. Ms. Benedict.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 22-0111. Mr. Lance Frost of Country Village Mobile Home Park has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Ms. Lisa Crumpler of Bob Jack Limited for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a mobile home located at 36 Gray Gable Drive within the Country Village Mobile Home Park subdivision and the Skiffs Creek watershed. Here you can see the entire Country Village Mobile Home Park outlined in this parcel and the Skiffs Creek watershed outlined in this pink color. This parcel was platted in 1970 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Here's aerial photography from 2002, which was when a mobile home last resided on this lot. And from 2021, how it currently appears with no mobile home on it. Here's the topography at the site, which is fairly flat. And the total lot size of this property is 0.12 acres, of which 50% is located in the RPA. The applicant is proposing to replace that previously existing 1,064 square foot mobile home with a new 966 square foot home. So here in red is the 100-foot resource protection area, the 50-foot resource protection area, and the area in yellow is the proposed mobile home within the landward 50-foot RPA. The total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 587 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impervious impacts equals 14 shrubs. Here's site photography. There is an existing 20 by 20 concrete or asphalt parking slab, which is shown here in the front of this picture. Moving towards the middle of the site, approximately where the RPA begins, and standing at the back of the site, looking back towards the road. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a mobile home. This application meets the ordinance conditions and should be heard by the board because the mobile home is a new installation on a lot that has remained vacant for approximately 20 years. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be moderate for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The submittal of a mitigation plan equating to 14 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. A surety of $500 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. This exception request approval shall become null and void if construction has not begun by October 12th, 2023, with written requests for an extension submitted no later than August 31st, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Thank you. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
Were the wetlands delineated for the purposes of establishing the RPA boundary?
I'm not sure.
There was a trailer in that mobile home in that location before.
Yes, the last time we know there was a trailer there was around 2002.
Did they move that trailer for a reason, or it just,
I'm not entirely sure if it was just the homeowner vacated the area or why. I just know that that was the last time there was a mobile home on that lot.
that has been a mobile home lot for 20 years around it?
If not more, yes.
It's probably not particularly relevant, but do you know how sewage is handled within the mobile home?
I do not know personally, but I could get back to you on that.
I apologize for my coughing. Is there any other questions for Ms. Benedict? If not, thank you. And we will open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to come forward and speak on this matter? Any public comments? No? Okay, so the public hearing is closed, and we will discuss amongst the board.
Well, Mr. Chairman, granted, there was a previous use. The property was platted before the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Act. Had there been a trailer there today that was being replaced, my view is we likely would have granted in that authorization to replace it. I guess I do have a question for staff. It looked like site work was underway. Was this stopped midstream to allow the board to act on this, or is that related to another activity?
To my knowledge, it was related to a different activity. What in particular, I can't speak to, but they had not started construction or not started installing the mobile home when pictures were taken.
But they were doing land disturbing activity within the RPA.
Unclear on what exactly that activity was.
Yeah, I concur. I think today would just be a replacement. It's difficult to see what else, if they want to responsibly use this land, what else they could do. You can't really shrink the square footage. You can't really move it any further forward. But it is, it looks like it's a replacement.
Mr. Chairman, if there's no other comments, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please.
A motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBPA 22-0111 at 36 Gray Gables Drive.
We have a motion to adopt.
So a motion to adopt, so a yes vote would be to adopt the resolution. Mr. Roadley?
Yes?
Mr. Waltrip? Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Motion passes.
The next public hearing, CBPA TAC 22 TAC 0121, 1676 Jamestown Road. Ms. Benedict?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Robin Benedict, Watershed Planner, presenting CBPA 22-0121. Mr. Anthony Lubier of VHB has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of JTR Properties LLC for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the installation of a sanitary sewer located at 1676 Jamestown Road within the Powhatan Terra subdivision and the Powhatan Creek watershed. You can see the subject parcel outlined in blue here, and again, that is the Powhatan Creek watershed shown in pink. Here's aerial photography of the project location, topography on the site, the floodplain as it affects this site, and the resource protection area. The total project area is 17.35 acres, of which 44% is located within the RPA. The applicants, oh, my apologies, this is also the sanitary sewer line. The applicants are proposing to install a sanitary sewer connection to the existing pump station on the adjacent property. So on this site plan, you see the 100-foot resource protection area and the sanitary sewer connection shown in orange. This box right above the sanitary sewer connection is the existing pump station. All other color-coded items on this site plan are administrative approvals that are not under the purview of this board. Total impacts to the RPA associated with this proposal equate to 2,340 square feet. Required mitigation for this amount of impacts would equal double the amount of impacts as dedicated undisturbed natural open space. The applicants have proposed mitigation for these impacts with a total of 1.99 acres of undisturbed natural open space as mitigation, and that is shown here in yellow. Here is the area of impacts at that existing pump station, and all areas of yellow are the dedicated natural open space. Standing at the existing pump station and looking out, this is the site photography. Standing a little bit further down into the site, then further towards the heart of the RPA. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the installation of a sanitary sewer. This application meets the ordinance conditions and should be heard by the board because the installation of a sanitary sewer is not water dependent and is proposed to be constructed within the RPA buffer. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied to other property owners in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, and reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with this proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval for this exception request, and if the board wishes to approve this request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. A deed of natural open space be recorded in the Williamsburg, James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a land disturbing permit. The exception request shall become null and void if construction has not begun by October 12th, 2023, with a written request for an extension submitted no later than August 31st, 2023, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
So in the site plan, the picture, the green for the grading and the red, that's not part of this consideration. It's just the yellow box.
Correct, just the yellow.
What was the total square footage?
2,340 square feet of impacts.
I assume this is a below-grade sewer line as opposed to an aerial
It is an aerial crossing.
crossing.
How long a line is this aerial?
I'm sorry?
How long is the aerial line?
I don't have that number in front of me at this moment.
This will be a suspended pipe, suspended conduit of some kind?
Yes.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Benedict.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to come forward or their representative? Please state your name and address for the record. Thank you, sir.
Afternoon, Chair, members of the board. I'm Steve Romeo with VHB. I reside at 115 Tides Run, Yorktown. The aerial portion of this sewer construction, I believe, is outside of the RPA. I believe that most of the, if not all of the sewer line will be underground in the RPA portion. It's certainly underground as it goes into the pump station, and it's underground till it exits the slope, and it's not a very high aerial crossing, and it's not a very long aerial crossing. I think it's less than 80 feet. Other questions I might answer?
It's hard to make water flow uphill, so.
Much as we try.
No other questions? Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward and speak on this matter? If not, we'll close the public hearing, open it to the board members. Sewer tie-in.
Yeah, fairly straightforward. I mean, given the location of the pump station, it seems an impact of some sort is unavoidable.
I have a motion.
I move to adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board Case Number CBPA-22-0121 at 1676 Jamestown Road.
So motion is to adopt. Mr. Roadley?
Yes?
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
Yes?
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Motion carried.
The last case, CBPA TAC 22 TAC 0126 at 112 Discovery Lane. Mr. Long?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here presents CBPA-22-0126. Ms. April Warren has applied for an after-the-fact exception request for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of gravel paths, a wooden work area, a greenhouse, a pergola structure, and 2 sheds at 112 Discovery Lane. Along with this request, there is a new exception request for the approval of a shed and a deck. The vicinity map above shows the parcel outlined here in blue with the watershed boundary here in pink. That watershed is the Powhatan Creek watershed. This parcel was platted in 1975 prior to the enactment of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. The total lot size of this property is 0.41 acres, of which 59% is located within the RPA. Above, you will see the 2017 aerial photographs from the James City County Property Information Systems, and then the changes to the property by the 2021 aerial photography. The topography of this lot is a fairly flat lot that slopes downwards towards a bulkhead and a canal system within the Powhatan Shores subdivision. The floodplain as it affects this property does fall within the AE zone of the FEMA floodplain, and the base flood elevation is determined at 7 feet. Again, this property is engulfed 59% within the resource protection area. The RPA comes up about 3/4 of the way through the house, and the entirety of the rear of the lot would be within the RPA. The site plan above shows both the after-the-fact and the future improvements that are being heard before the board tonight. In orange, you will see the after-the-fact proposals, and in yellow, you see the new exception requests that is also being heard. Again, the applicant is requesting after-the-fact approval for the gravel walkways that surround a raised garden area. The garden beds are found in between each of the, I should say the gravel is found in between each garden area. The raised gardens and the garden beds are not being heard as impervious surface, just the gravel walkways. The wooden work areas that are also adjacent to the gravel walk area. A greenhouse with a cold frame associated with it, and a gardening shed. Additionally, the pergola area can be found here. The portion of this pergola that is being heard as impervious surface would be the paver walkway that is underneath of it. As far as the new improvements that are being requested by the board tonight, they are found here in yellow, and that would be an additional shed and a deck. Off of this site plan, which will come up in a later site plan, you will also see a third shed that is also being heard by the board tonight. This was not within the 2017 aerial photographs, but did show up by the time the 2021 aerial photographs were taken, so that too is being heard as an after-the-fact subject. I have provided a spreadsheet for the amount of impacts for both the after-the-fact proposals and the new section of this exception request. So you will find landward numbers here in yellow and seaward numbers in orange. As far as the gravel and the wood working areas in the site plan previously, they equated to 836 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA. Subsequently, the cold frame equated to 45 square feet of impacts, the greenhouse 120, both of these to the seaward 50-foot RPA. The garden shed equated to 42 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA and 24 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA. The pergola structure moving outside of the seaward 50-foot RPA into the landward 50-foot RPA equated to 165 square feet of impacts. The compost work area equated 94 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, and the second after-the-fact shed equating to 216 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA. In total, after-the-fact impacts to the RPA equated to 423 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA, and 1,119 square feet of impacts to the seaward 50-foot RPA, for a total of 1,542 square feet. In discussions with the applicant wished to express that there were calls made to the building safety, or somebody from James City County, and that perhaps information was not given regarding a Chesapeake Bay preservation waiver. The Stormwater and Resource Protection Division, however, did not receive any such call or information that this request had been made. Because this is being heard after the fact, mitigation amounts would be doubled for normal impact areas. What would normally be 4 planting units from the total number of impacts is being heard as 8 units of mitigation requirements for this after the fact portion. The new section of impervious that is being heard here before tonight, again, is another shed and a deck. As far as the shed goes, this amount of impact equates to 160 square feet of impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA, and the deck equates to 288 square feet of impacts. This deck area originally was 384 square feet. There is a gravel or a concrete pad in this area. We have taken that subsequent area and reduced it from that impervious total because the construction is being proposed over top of an existing impervious area. Total amounts of impacts to the RPA associated with the new proposal equate to 448 square feet of impacts within the landward 50-foot RPA. This equates to 1 planting unit. Again, this is the site plan that was shown previously as it is overlaid onto the property itself. Again, everything in orange is being heard after the fact. The sheds, greenhouse, gravel walking areas, and wooden decks are in this region, with the pergola structure here. And this is the bulkhead. The RPA, the 50-foot RPA is this line here, and again, the seaward 50-foot RPA here. Excuse me, I should point out to the board that this shed here should be in orange. That is being heard after the fact. Some site photographs from the property. You can see the canal system and a bulkhead here. This is the garden system of which the walkway and other working areas are being made around. You're standing approximately at the edge of the proposed deck and looking towards what would be what I'm going to call shed number 1 for this, for the purpose of this. You can see a second structure here. This would be the greenhouse, and the second structure here would be the garden shed. A little bit closer up, you can see the wooden working areas and some of the gravel paths. Looking back towards the canal, and again, the greenhouse area. The applicant has also proposed to utilize rain barrels to capture runoff from the greenhouse and the after-the-fact shed to capture runoff and distribute into the garden. Here is a picture of the after-the-fact shed. The area where the proposed new shed would be heard, and you can see the second after-the-fact shed towards the left of this photograph. That is a more clear photo of the the second after-the-fact shed being heard, that was constructed sometime between 2017 and 2021. Pictures showing the gravel walk areas that are being counted as impervious during this proposal. And a shot of this section of this proposal from a side angle. Looking over towards the pergola area, again, the impervious being counted here is the walkway that is underneath. And looking towards the proposed new deck area here. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed. That reasonable conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of gravel paths, a wooden work area, a greenhouse, a wooden deck, a pergola structure, and 3 sheds. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because all of these structures are considered accessory in nature. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined the impacts associated with the proposal to be major for the proposed development. Should the board wish to approve the request, staff recommends the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. The submittal of a mitigation plan equating to 9 planting units, which is 9 canopy trees, 18 understory trees, and 27 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. That a surety of $4,500 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the mitigation plantings. That all development activities located in the special flood hazard area shall comply with Article 6, Division 3 floodplain area regulations of the James City County zoning ordinance and receive all required approvals and permits. Then an affidavit be recorded in the Williamsburg James City County Courthouse prior to the issuance of a building permit. And that this exception request shall become null and void if construction is not begun by October 12, 2023. And the written request for an extension to an exception shall be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than August 31st, 2023. Thank you very much, and I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So long, is there a contractor associated with this work?
Not to my knowledge, but I will let the applicant speak to that.
It would seem that there's insufficient space for planning of the mitigation. So there would be likely a payment into fund of.
Staff does have some concerns regarding the amount of mitigation required and the space that's on the lot. In circumstances like this where the required mitigation amounts would not be suitable and would not survive on a lot like this or by the space provided, staff would allow up to half of the planting units to be paid into a Chesapeake Bay mitigation fund. This would be the monetary equivalent of those plantings that would then go into a fund that would be used for other stormwater projects within the county. But this would only be allowable up to half of that amount, and the other half could be substituted between the tropic layers.
This This option is an administrative decision?
Yes, staff would work with the applicant to obtain a mitigation plan that we felt would be survivable or suitable, and go from there. But that is part of the conditions being approved here, is that they would need to work with us with a mitigation plan to show that this is survivable.
So for the accessory building, that roughly 12 by 18 building that's directly adjacent to the house, this is also after the fact
Yes.
as well? Do you know how long that building's been there? In a year? or-
Based on, just make sure you are asking about this building?
Yes.
Yes. Excuse me one moment. Based on aerial photography, we have an image of it in 2021, however, no indication of it in 2017. So we assume it was built sometime between those years.
Thank you.
There was no exception request for that?
Correct. There was no exception request for that, nor any of the other items being heard after the fact tonight.
Is there footings in the ground on those buildings or setting?
I am not sure, but I would direct that question to the applicant.
Am I correct to say that buildings 1,200 square feet and below, if they're not concreted in the ground, they're not treated as a building permit?
That I do not know. That would be a question most well suited for a building official.
Any other questions for Mr. Long? All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
We will open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to come forward and speak on this matter?
For matters of time, there is a public speaker here who is not the applicant who would like to speak before the applicant, as long as that's okay with the board.
I think that's acceptable. Please state your name and address, sir. Oh, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gary Nestor. I own the property at 113 Godspeed Lane, which is right across the way from this activity. And I guess the main thing I wanted to convey is we've had a lot of hard rains of late, a lot of storms. And from my observation point, you know, right across the way from them, I've not noticed any excessive runoff or any runoff at all that would be generated from this activity that would be detrimental to the water quality. That's what I've observed. And you know, I have personally no problem with what they're doing, but I just wanted to convey that I haven't seen anything detrimental that, you know, that they've caused. And that was the main thing I wanted to convey. Thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Over 5 years ago.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Would you mind just stating your name and
Oh,
address
sure,
for the
I'm
record?
sorry. My name is April Warren. I am located at 112 Discovery Lane in Williamsburg. About 5 years ago, a little over 5 years ago, when I was contemplating putting up the first shed that you see that's completed, I called James City County Building Safety and Permit Department to determine where and what I could build on this property. I informed them that I needed to know what the setback requirements and any other restrictions/requirements were on my property. The following information was provided to me by a James City County building official over the phone, and the information provided applies to each subsequent contact that followed as well. They told me that no permit is required for any open, unenclosed structure to include open garden structures, arbors, pergolas, etc. Every structure on our property complies with this requirement. No permit was required for enclosed structures, sheds, greenhouses under 250 square feet. Every structure on our property complies with this requirement. If a structure is further than 10 feet from the house, enclosed sheds have a 5-foot setback from the side and rear property lines. If an enclosed structure is less than 10 feet from the house, setback is 35 feet from the rear property line and 15 feet to the side property line. Every structure on our property complies with these setback requirements. No permit is needed for decks at ground level, under 30 inches. No setback for decks at grade or ground level. Decks attached to home must follow setback requirements outlined above for enclosed structures less than 10 feet from the home. No permit is needed for fences, walkways, paths, etc., and there's no setback requirement on these things. You can build any of these things right up to the property line. I was never informed that garden beds, ground level or raised, and to answer your question about when that initial shed was built, it was built, I believe, the latter part of 2017 into 2018. I was never informed that garden beds, ground level or raised, required any type of permits or had any type of requirement at all. I was never informed or directed by any government official to contact any other government department or agency regarding these issues. 18 months ago, my husband made a similar call to the James City County Building Safety and Permit Department to confirm what I was told previously, as we continue to do what you have currently seen based on the photographs they showed you. He also did so to make sure no requirements had changed and that the information I had received in my previous inquiry was correct and current. He spoke to a county building official and gave them our address. He was informed of the exact same requirements I was informed of as I outlined above. He also asked if there was anything else or that he should know before beginning construction and was informed that there was not. Again, no mention was made during this conversation of any requirements for any type of garden. At the same time, my husband was directed to and then contacted the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality for information on building our garden near the canal. He spoke with an official who directed him to the following information, which comes directly from the department's website. It states on the website, what types of things can I do in the RPA? As a homeowner living in or near an RPA, you can help protect local streams in Chesapeake Bay by preserving this valuable stream buffer. Many homeowner activities are allowed in the RPA, such as gardening. Typical gardening activities are allowed unless you are digging and exposing the soil of an area greater than 50 feet by 50 feet, which is 2,500 square feet, or removing mature trees with a diameter of 3 inches or greater. Our garden is less than 1,000 square feet to include the gravel paths and walkways. No trees were removed anywhere in our yard for any of this construction. 1 to 2 months prior to June 28th, we had an unexpected visit from a James City County building official inspector. He inquired as to what we were constructing, which I told him, and I also mentioned I had been in contact with James City County prior to any construction and were following all the guidelines provided, and we did not need a permit for anything we had done or were doing on the property, which he could visibly see. He then stated that it is their job to respond to inquiries or complaints made to James City County, and that was the reason for the visit. He did not say that we had to halt what we were doing or that there were any violations. If anything was wrong, he clearly had an official duty to inform me of these things. At the very least, the James City County Building Safety and Permit Department had an important duty to inform me of any violation in a timely manner after this visit. The first inspector could clearly see the property backed up to the canal, and yet he said nothing. Then on June 24th, Trevor Long and Robin Benedict came to my residence stating why they were there and asking if they could see what was being constructed in the backyard. I took them into the yard and told them everything I noted previously. At that time, I was informed by Trevor as to issues from the Stormwater and Resource Protection Department and the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act due to the property being in the floodplain, and this would have to go under review. I asked if we needed to halt what we were doing, and he said yes, so we complied. I met with Michael Wolfson, Section Chief, Resource Protection, on August 22nd at his office. During our meeting, I informed him that my husband and I both did our due diligence regarding contacting county offices to ensure we were following county guidelines and ensuring nothing we were doing required permits, waivers, or prior approvals. We moved forward based on information that was told to us, not knowing that we were not informed properly by the county officials, which is obviously not our fault. During our conversation, I mentioned that in the 44 years this home has been in our family, previously owned by my parents, there's only been one major storm whereby water was forced from the canal onto the property beyond what would be normal during an extremely high tide during a normal storm. I also mentioned that much of the land in Powhatan Shores is clay, and water takes a long time to absorb into the properties due to that fact. Since taking over ownership of the home, my major intent with the yard was to increase water absorption and certainly to ensure nothing is flowing back into the canal that should not. When we added the gardens on the property to include annuals, perennials, and vegetables, we purchased and put down a lot of additional soil to mainly increase water absorption on the property and enhance the ability of the plants to grow and thrive. I noted during our discussion as well that anywhere we have decking or paths, gravel or pavers, we did not put down sand or any other materials that would not allow drainage through the rocks or between pavers or deck boards. With all the rain we have recently had, we have not had any issues with drainage in any of those areas, and we have had no standing water at all in those locations. Natural materials were used in the construction of this garden: lumber, gravel, and soil. The base areas where stone is present are covered with landscape fabric. The entire base layer of this garden is anchored to the ground by 2-foot painted and sealed rebar, and each successive layer is attached by 8 or 10-inch screws and an 18-inch rebar. The garden is solid, stable, and leaches absolutely nothing into the canal. Even a catastrophic storm like Isabel in 2003 will do nothing to this garden except get it wet. The raised beds will contain everything, all the soil, that is certain. You should also be aware that my father owned this house during Isabel, so I know exactly what the water did on this property at that time, and that was a 100-year event. Isabel would have done nothing to this garden except get it wet, and nothing would have been put into the canal then or by a similar storm event now or in the future based on anything we have done. We have created no additional runoff into the waterway. In fact, we have diminished the runoff and any soil erosion from this property considerably by increasing the height of the bulkhead, sealing it with each layer of lumber, and then sealing the interior portions of the raised beds with waterproof membrane. Furthermore, every board used in the construction of this garden was individually sealed with Thompson's water seal. Nothing will ever leak into the canal from this garden. We use no pesticides, fertilizers, or chemicals to produce what we are growing, as it is 100% organic. We have constructed this garden to feed our family organic produce, which is too expensive to buy at stores or farmers markets, and because of escalating food prices and possible food shortages, which are currently taking place in many countries around the world, and the United States will feel this impact as well. As you can clearly see, after numerous contacts with government agencies, officials, and officials, my husband and I gathering all the information we possibly could, contacting everyone we were directed to, we clearly did our due diligence, and nothing was ever said about contacting anyone at James City County Storm, Water, and Resource Protection Department or about the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act and how it affected construction on this property. It was never my intent to violate any laws or avoid any permits. No county or state government official ever directed us to contact your department, and they clearly had a duty and numerous opportunities to do so. That is clearly negligence on the part of the county officials, not ours. After all these calls and interactions with government building officials, we, meaning my husband and I, had a reasonable expectation that we had been informed accurately and thoroughly and could proceed with confidence. Obviously, that now seems clearly not to be the case, and it was not for a lack of trying on my or our part. We did our part and were let down by government officials who had an obligation to inform us accurately and thoroughly. Furthermore, everything we have done has enhanced this property for wildlife of all sorts. Insects, birds, hummingbirds, butterflies, bees, deer, etc. love this yard and are here daily in abundance. There is no soil erosion taking place and will be none in the future. There are no nutrients, pesticides, or other hazardous chemicals flowing into the canal from our property because of any of what we have done now or will do in the future. Before starting any of this, my husband spoke with our 2 next-door neighbors, and they were fine with what we were going to do. In addition, neighbors and other people coming into the neighborhood from elsewhere have told us how nice it all looks so far. People stop by in boats, kayaks, canoes, paddle boards, on their bikes, walking by, and they stop out front in their cars, talk with my husband or I if we are in the yard, and comment on how beautiful it looks and how impressed they are with my husband's carpentry skills. We have not had one negative comment, except obviously for the complaint that was filed. Obviously, this entire investigation stemmed from someone in this neighborhood, or in my neighborhood, I should say, contacting your office, not knowing that the proper due diligence had been done regarding any structures or plantings in my yard, as far as we knew. To me, it seems as though it is some busybody who just likes to insert themselves into other people's business, enjoys causing unjustified aggravation to others for whatever reason, and could be simply that the individual doesn't like me or my husband or is jealous. That is who complained. It was not someone concerned about the environment. Finally, having lived or been associated with this neighborhood for over 40 years, there are other gardens right up to the bulkheads on the canals. There are many impervious walkways and backyards to include gravel and rock areas of all sizes of material butting up to bulkheads, sheds and outbuildings much closer to the canal than anything we have done, and many ground-level decks that connect docks to yards or simply hang over the bulkhead and run back into the yard. In closing, it is obvious that we have improved this property for wildlife, while also being very careful at additional expense to myself, as outlined above, in how we constructed the garden to thoroughly protect the water quality of the canal due to runoff from this property. I believe that that is the primary intent of the Chesapeake Bay Conservation Act. I also don't think that many people would go to the lengths we have to ensure nothing would flow into the canal. We have not intentionally or knowingly violated the Chesapeake Bay Conservation Act or floodplain building restrictions. We had no knowledge, nor were we ever informed of such restrictions in the numerous contacts we had with James City County building officials or when my husband contacted the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. We made every attempt to gather the necessary pertinent information and follow the letter of the law as explained to us by government officials. Based on the report provided to me by Trevor Long, I am respectfully requesting the board reconsider the mitigation amounts outlined as well. As stated in the document, the mitigation amounts have been doubled due to this exception request being heard after the fact. Once again, I want to reiterate, we did our due diligence, but we were not provided accurate information from the county from the get-go. The lot size is not large, and the number of plantings being requested is quite extensive for the side of the yard in the floodplain. All the annual perennial vegetable gardens and pots full of herbs, flowers, etc. in our back and side yards are obviously assisting with water absorption and reducing runoff as well. It is my hope that we can work this entire situation out amicably. I never intentionally violated any ordinance, acts, or laws. I followed every guideline I was given by every government official my husband or I contacted, and I hope and pray that you will consider all the above and will allow me to obtain a permit if necessary and continue working towards completing this project. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. I tried to be as thorough as possible.
Was there a contracting company that was helping you at some point
No,
during your
my
construction?
father. No, the original shed I had built, I had somebody come in and do it, but everything else has been done by my husband.
There was a porta-john that was in one of the pictures.
There's no porta-john in our picture, on our property.
Could you cycle back?
You might be looking at little sheds, but there's no porta-john on my property.
It might be a little shed.
Like little plastic sheds.
Yeah, I think that may be a plastic storage container.
Okay.
In the place of your proposed shed.
Okay.
Is that what
Yeah,
it was?
we have a lot of plastic sheds there where.
Right there
that's
to the
not
left?
a porta-john.
Okay.
Those are plastic sheds.
All right, I understand.
I have a bathroom in my house.
And just to get the timeline correct, you said you spoke with building permits starting in 2017?
Yes, prior to even doing the first shed, yes.
And then
And then my husband had contact with them about 18 months ago.
And when did you contact DEQ the first time?
I'm sorry,
The Department of Environmental Quality?
that was the second time, before he did anything in the backyard that you currently see under construction.
What date was that?
I don't have a date when he did that, he just said it was about
About the same
18
time?
months ago, yes.
Okay. And so then, and then what was the date that the first building permit, the person came to check for the building permit? And
All I can say was 1 to 2 months prior to June 28th, because I didn't document the day. And unfortunately, I don't know if the guy gave me a card when he came. The second time is when Trevor came, and he came on the 28th of June.
Okay. And it wasn't until his arrival that you had heard anything?
Anything about stopping and what we were doing was wrong, yes.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know when you made contacts to the county, I know there's this distinction between like building permits and setbacks and requirements and things like that, and then also building in an RPA. Did you make it clear to the individuals that you were talking with at the county that, where your house was or where this project was in proximity to,
Yes.
excuse me, to the
Because
water?
I either gave them the address or they asked for the address. So I'm assuming they would know that based on the address. And maybe that's a wrong assumption on my part.
Are there any other questions for the applicant? The board members? All right, thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward and speak on this matter?
Mr. Chairman, I do have two letters that were sent anonymously into the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division that should be read into the record. The first letter states, "The Warrens have built way too many buildings in their backyard. It's not aesthetically eye-appealing, basically an eyesore. It takes away from the water view and appears to be too close to the canal. We are not a farming neighborhood. Apparently, the Warrens only think of themselves and not of the Chesapeake Bay Act and also neighbors. Please help our neighborhood and have them remove the buildings." The second letter states, "Dear Chesapeake Bay Board, I oppose the approval of CBPA-22-0126 at 112 Discovery Lane, construction and approval landscape improvements. I oppose the overwhelming construction and landscape plan. This construction layout is overwhelming to the property and the house. There will be a total of 3 sheds, not 2, because 1 shed has already been built on the property. This layout infringes on the adjacent property owners and does not belong in a residential neighborhood. With a small lot like 112 Discovery Lane, this plan does not blend into the Powhatan Shores residential neighborhood. Homes that are located across the canal have direct sight of the overwhelming amount of structures on the property. This project is overwhelming for the neighborhood and the home at 112 Discovery Lane. Please reject this construction plan request." Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this matter? Not, then we'll close the public hearing, open amongst the board members. This is a difficult one.
Well, Mr. Chairman, let me make a comment at the beginning. Given the applicant's contact with the county, not throwing darts or arrows at anybody, I really, in my opinion, perhaps we should consider this as all new work as opposed to an after-the-fact element to it. Just one way to view this through a lens, because of it, there's a lot going on with the site plan, but that throws an added wrinkle to it that is perhaps unnecessary. There appears to be due diligence on the applicant's part to determine what the rules were regarding construction on their lot, and albeit the property owner is always responsible, but there appears to have been a good faith effort, not only initially, but then subsequent with the inspection So that's my opinion based on what I've heard tonight.
To play devil's advocate and to give some pushback, I mean, she basically described, you know, I've been here about the same time she built the shed, and the multiple times they've contacted building permit, you know, they contacted Department of Environmental Quality, gave their address. You know, we live in James City County, like at least 50% of it is in the RPA, and the idea that, you know, all these Swiss cheese holes lined up and nobody ever said, hey, you need to look at talk to stormwater. That's testing. I don't know. I would be shocked that if everything lined up, that in this case, it fell through the cracks. So I kind of do give some pushback on that.
I think even if it was considered as new work in a new application and not after the fact, I think the mitigation plan, I think, is still potentially unreasonable for the size of that property. Or, you know, it's essentially doubling it for the after the fact, but even if you bring it back to half, it seems to still be a lot.
And for considering this new, would we, as a board, looking at it as all new, would we approve essentially building a second house in the seaward?
So that's kind of the point where I started my deliberation, and as I said, there's a lot going on. We tend to typically recommend, if you have to encroach into the RPA buffer, that you encroach in the landward 50 feet before you encroach in the seaward 50 feet, if at all possible. Depending upon purpose and need, there's a variety of factors that weigh into that, and each property is unique. So at that point, I looked at what is proposed in the seaward 50 feet, planting beds and gravel path, and then the work areas, if I'm reading the plans correctly, and the greenhouse. Would we have rather that been built in the seaward 50 feet, or the landward 50 feet, excuse me? My guess is we would have asked for that at the time. Try to remove that as far back from the water as possible.
I agree. That's what we would have looked to minimize the square footage and pull as much out away from the water as possible.
I'm sympathetic with the idea of gardening and establishing rollable plots, even within the RPA. I was somewhat surprised by the engineering involved in this garden and how much structure was put in place there. Though, as Ms. Warren says, it does encapsulate soil. Help with the retention of quick rain shower and so forth within the plots. Structures. Quick reaction was that there are a lot of structures here just to support the area of the garden being.
I think too, my concern with this project would be too that if approved, the precedent that would also create going forward with the amount of impervious cover in the project.
Is there any way of breaking this down and partially those buildings that are up now, are they going to be enclosed? Are they open through or are they enclosed buildings? I never really saw a lot of lumber down there. Maybe they are, I don't know.
I think there was going to be 3 sheds that were enclosed and then a greenhouse, and then there'd
Be,
the
it
greenhouse
would be enclosed, the ones that's open now would be enclosed.
except for the
Except for the
pergola.
pergola.
So you're adding more enclosed buildings to the site. Yeah. But my question was, is that something that could be, hearing a lot of negative things here, and is it something that can be inserted in there to be able to, because it looks like that the owners have done a lot of work. The carpentry work is excellent. Her husband has done a wonderful job out there. Myself, as a homeowner, I like to work with the public and help them as much as I can. And I just think I'd hate to see it turn completely down. If we could give them something that would be suitable for them, that would work in their favor too. I think the gardens and everything, I see no problem with that as far as the runoffs or anything. I think you're talking about the buildings or what you're talking about. Whether you cut back on them or leave them open instead of closing them in as a shed, that's just a thought.
Mr. Waltrip and Mr. Chairman and the board. So the application that is before you tonight is before you for an up or down vote on the project itself. There is some room to change some of the conditions, for instance, the mitigation plantings, as Mr. Roadley was mentioning earlier, the amount of the surety and other conditions on the project, if so approved. But if you would like to change the project itself, that would have to be a new application from the applicant, rather than approving it and changing it at this meeting here tonight.
I'm sorry, ma'am, but the public hearing's closed.
Oh, I'm
But,
sorry.
but if you would like, if there's any objections to the board, could you? Okay, I'll open up the public hearing.
I apologize.
Oh, no, it's the, a matter of protocol.
The small shed there you see is actually a tool shed for us to be able to put in all the gardening stuff for the tools and stuff that we do for the gardening work, okay? The greenhouse it's going to be enclosed, but the side panels and the roof are going to be clear. I mean, we can't have a greenhouse without sunlight getting into it. And I sent to Trevor exactly what it's called, and I can't remember the name of it because my husband's doing it, but whatever it is, it's some sort of plastic see-through stuff that allows light through into the greenhouse. So,
Okay. Thank you. And is there anyone else who'd like to come forward to speak? Okay, I'll close the public hearing and reopen the deliberations amongst the board. But the other consideration that I have is I went and I looked at the aerial map, and the neighborhood around it is minimal. There's minimal landscaping. So the precedent we set by allowing this to go forward would be, I imagine we'll just see more of these types of
When you
projects.
say landscaping, you mean encroachment?
Encroachments, yes. So that's an additional concern.
I know that, Mr. Chairman, if I might, I know that the county staff consider gravel to be an impervious surface because of compaction over time, and it can obviously produce runoff. These gravel pathways, though, I'm questioning whether they would compact to the point of actually producing runoff. Given the nature of use, walking. just an observation, a lot of what we're seeing in the seaward 50 feet is gravel path, gravel areas. We do have the greenhouse, a work area, and a work area deck, and then the small shed that encroaches slightly. But just an observation, even though there's a lot of red on our site plan, quite a bit of that is gravel as well.
Like, I don't have any issues with the garden. The gardening is fine. The sheds, the greenhouse, a lot of that impervious that's in the decking, in the seaward, I would prefer that not be there. That, from my perspective.
What you're saying is, and I'm still hearing this, that it's too much for that size lot. So if you vote it down, they could come back and re-evaluate it towards lessening some of the items on it to still get possibly what they want, but we would have to vote it down to be able to do that.
I think if we voted down on I'm sure we'll get corrected if we're wrong, but I think they'll have to wait a period of time, correct, before they can come back, and then they would have to begin removing the existing structures.
I think there's two issues here, Mr. Chairman, and the board. There is, on the violation side, how the county chooses to enforce violations of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, and we do have discretion in how we do that. On the potential new application for a new project, we could bring it forward as quickly as the applicant is able to bring a new application, should the board deny the current application and should the applicant wish to try again. We've had applications change and then come back as a new application in the next month before. But that speed is depending upon forces outside of my and our control.
Okay. So if we deny this, would that support the find of the violation?
No, they are two separate issues. One has nothing to do with the other. This is to approve both the after the fact and the prospective encroachments into the RPA, which would have the effect of retroactively removing the county's ability to enforce the violation, because you would have essentially blessed it, as it were. But the county's ability to enforce the violation outside of this proceeding, outside of an approval, is entirely separate.
Okay.
And the county does work with people. So.
Okay, I think I understand. Any other comments from the board? Can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to deny the application for CBPA-22-0126.
Okay, so a yes vote would be an approval of that's a bad word. A yes vote would be for the denial. So just to clarify what we're voting on. Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
No.
Mr. May?
Yes.
Mr. Lukens?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
So the motion carries for denial.
That concludes our public hearings for tonight. There are no board considerations and no matters of special privilege. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Means adjourned.